much. I'm very happy to be here, and I enjoy giving my presentation here. And you might be disappointed because I'm trying to move you into an area where agriculture economists meet with engineers. Because I have sometimes the feeling agriculture economists are a little bit away from what is hardly going on in the sector. It's part of the discussion. And one of the problems we very often see when we look at agriculture economists that we tend to look into the past. Yeah, we look at statistics, and if they are not statistics, we don't care. And many of the things that are happening at the moment have nothing to do with statistics, but have to do with things that might happen in the future. So it might be giving you a kind of an introduction about also discussions other fields deal with when they talk about food security or sustainability. Very quickly, you have also already told where I come from. I come from a beautiful area. I come from a wine area, as you can see here. So it's not only in Australia that you have wine, you have also wine in my area, good red wine. And then this is the city I come from. It's Bonn. The bee is disappearing. It's very old. It has been established by the Romans. At that time, they knew where to live. They knew that it's a beautiful area. And it might interest you, that is this most dynamic area in Europe. It goes here from the south, maybe I do it by hand. It starts here with the Rhone Valley, and then the Rhine Valley, and then it ends at London. That is this kind of circle that is very, very dynamic, because it's good climate, it's warm, and have very light-hearted people. They love to live, let's say, and that's also why they drink wine. And you see here the yellow part here is the older European Union. It has now been enlarged. You see a Romanian, Bulgaria belongs to it, also Croatia, Slovenia. And you also realize that one of the mistakes, some people say that they were trying to capture Ukraine. And that brought now some of those issues now onto the political agenda. But you see how big it is. Okay, anyhow, we are here in the center at the university, and I've established this center some years ago, you mentioned, and it's a center where different people work together from different disciplines. Now, I think when we try to get into this area of discussion, okay, we said we talk about security, we talk about sustainability, and there are a lot of other things that come with it. We talk about affordability, quality, diversity. Nobody just wants to rely on one stable food or whatever. Food safety, so a lot of issues, and our things we are dealing with at the moment is we are in a time of change. All of those things are being discussed everywhere. We talk about demographics, we talk about reduction of resources, diets, meat, all these discussions about Asia, growing population, urbanization, climate change. Thousands of things that are on the table where we say, okay, probably we cannot continue the way we have been doing it in the past. And that's where I get a little bit critical when we just look at the statistic of the past and then try to draw conclusions for the future. So it's what we call a European technology platform. Europe has developed meeting points for science and business, and they call it technology platforms. There are no associations involved or groups or whatever, but there are companies meeting with scientists from different areas, and one of them is called European Technology Platform Food for Life, and it deals especially with the food sector. And they summarized what we just discussed, that they say, okay, the sector has a responsibility. It's no other sector really apart from the health sector which has really a responsibility. You cannot go backward and disappear. So, because we have to eat. So it has to provide the food, it has to have the food that is safe, and it has to develop the food that has the appropriate quality and diversity. So that's one of those challenges that are there. And then on the other side, we have certain requirements, because when we look at the environment, economic, social needs, that's when we talk about sustainability. So these different issues. Now when we look at the first part, I like these discussions that are going on. You see some people, and I mention now from a European perspective, especially the Wageningen University, because that is their logo on top, that they say we have to produce in the future twice with half of the resources. That's nice, okay, it looks good. And then other people say, why? We have enough. We eat too much. Yeah? All of the, maybe not Europeans, I don't know, but at least some countries, okay, people are very, very obese. Yeah? So one third eats too much, one third gets too little, so it's just a question of distribution. And then you look at all the waste, and a lot of policy efforts are now focused on waste reduction. So I think we have to deal with both things. So in between, things will happening, but it's not as strict as it is mentioned here. So it's a kind of a combination of policies. And when we look at the other part, this environmental, social issues, I just mentioned some of those issues that are being discussed in Europe. That's the European strategy. It says, yes, we are moving towards a low-carbon economy, renewable energy, energy efficiency, etc. So I think those things are both on the table. Now, this is a picture where I think Europeans like to look at. I don't know how you look at it. They say, oh, it's terrible. Our resources go down, and then the problems amount, and then 9 billion people, or 10 billion, or 11 billion, I don't know what. So it's getting worse and worse and worse, and we have little less and less and less. And I was in a conference in South Africa about 8 weeks ago, of the International Farm and Agribusiness Management Association. Some of you might know. And then the Africans said, you are crazy. That's our picture. We are living in an age of opportunities. We don't have problems, fine, but we have opportunities as never before. And you should change your focus and look at the opportunities and how to deal with it. So that was really interesting, especially from an African point of view, where you say it's a lost continent and whatever. So we were discussing and starting to discuss about those issues, and then one of those elements that primarily came in was that a focused issue is the transparency of the whole system. And when I look at transparency, and I think we just ended 1 year ago, if somebody's interested, a research project in the European Commission where they said, okay, tell us about research needs towards transparency in politics, in management, in science, etc., etc., where to move to improve transparency. Because what is behind it is you have to understand what's going on there. That's one of the things. That's part of transparency. You have to know about opportunities, what can be done, what could be done, so looking into the future, and then also being able to support actions. What can we do to support actions? So it's a kind of a very comprehensive view when we talk about transparency. So I take this at the center point of my discussion when I continue now. Now the question for agricultural economists is how can we contribute to transparency and how can we utilize it and make something out of it. So I like this picture. It came from a chemical company some years ago, and I use it over and over again because I think it's highlighting some of our problems. Many people talk about food chains, and we have very few food chains in Europe because it's not working. Food chains are usually chains where a certain group of companies work closely together. And the Dutch were trying this about 10 years ago with their so-called IKB approach, integrated Kettenbeherrschung, something like this, so integrated chain management. And it didn't really work because when there was a bad harvest, they had the markets. What should they do? Should they lose the market or buy from somewhere else? And then all of a sudden, the chain was no longer closed, it was open. So it's not really working. So what we are dealing with are networks, which are quite complex. So this is just a picture which tries to summarize a little bit our problem. And then many of the discussions of the literature, when they talk about food chains, there's this kind of closed chain in mind, and don't see this open network issue. Now the question when we look at this question is, okay, what tools do we have for making transparency work? And now I try to look at some issues that are not on the mainstream, in the mainstream discussion of agricultural economists, and where I have also the feeling we communicate too little between the science people and other people here in our domain. And I was now just at the European Agricultural Economics Conference in Slovenia. And sometimes I get really disappointed because it's kind of closed shop. Working there, and then there are other disciplines, and they move forward. And we are looking at the statistics and looking into the back. So I try to put some of those issues now on the table. It's many slides, but I can always cut off. So one of the tools is knowledge when we talk about the future. You see this kind of slide which tells about the CO2 production when you have potatoes. So we need knowledge. Another tool is that we have technology. The third tool is people. And the fourth one, which I think is very important, is cooperation and coordination, those different types of tools. So I want now very quickly to go into those four tools and give you kind of an indication on what I think is relevant to think about. Because that's a little bit my thinking, and we need all those issues together. Now, if we just focus on one, it's not working. And I will try to show some examples on that. First, let's look at knowledge. I like this. Most of you know the name of Gay Johnson. A long time ago, he was once mentioning this kind of statement: what may be possible for the world to escape from what could be called the Malthusian trap. You know, that was this person who said, okay, we are all dying of hunger because there are too many people in the world, and then things develop completely different. So the question is, okay, it's knowledge that we developed over time. And now people say one of the big problems is demographics and the increase of population. And now the view could be completely different. It's not just people who have more talent. So more and more people are there we could utilize and have talent and are intelligent and produce knowledge. And this is now a graph which shows, okay, how many years people have lived. And that's, maybe I have to read it, more people have already lived in this decade than during the whole of the 17th century. So it's not just people to feed, but it's people who can contribute to develop this knowledge and learn on this. And then also they are more educated, years of schooling. So the question is, what can we make out of it? And then there are some of those buzzwords that are coming up at the moment. Maybe some of you might have been involved in those issues, like open innovations, that companies and whatever enterprises start to communicate with their environment, with people around them, and say, there is a lot of talent. So when we want to move into innovations, we should open up. This kind of opening up is everywhere. People are talking about swarm intelligence. We don't know yet what it is, how to work with it. That means getting many people together, moving in a certain direction. You all know about the buzzword open source, that knowledge is being put somewhere on the table, and then this knowledge is being dealt with many, many people out there. Wiki is one of those elements. We are start talking about big data that are there, tremendous sources of knowledge that are out there, and comes from this different type of people. Just taking this one example, I didn't know about biotech, what a wiki, I always knew about this wiki, this channel, you know this Wikipedia. But they're in different disciplines. There are these kind of open source knowledges that are being collected and put together by people. They're just open by this talent factor. These are like very much because it just came out of nowhere. It's a global food security index. It was developed by the Economist Intelligence Unit and then supported by Dupont. And what they've tried to do is to build on about 100 criteria that deals with the affordability, availability, quality and safety of food. It is open source. You can download it. It's huge, huge Excel sheets and people can work with it. And this is not just a kind of a basic summarizing picture that came out of it, where they say, okay, there's scores, green is fine, red is bad, etc. And then you can look at the individual elements and say, okay, where are the hot spots? What is going wrong? Where could we contribute as a discipline, etc.? And I think it's very clear when you see those. And you can very deeply dig into those data. So this is some of the knowledges that are evolving from people that are contributing to it. Another one, where just a quick discussion on water. You know, it is also one of those knowledge bases that are being that are evolving. And this is a scarcity of water. And you see Australia is red, means scarce. You see India is scarce, United States, that's scarcity, etc. And then you look at the picture at the bottom, Where Europe is not scarce, it's green. And red down there means we are importing water, and green means I'm exporting. I love it. Australia is exporting water and they are scarce of water. It's beautiful. And then you look at India, scarcity of water, but they are exporting water to Europe. Well, Europe is very good. They are getting water from all over the world. Very good policy. I don't know if you have realized that before. Now, one of those things we had to deal with in the future is we have to look at trade streams, analyze them. There might be changes in the future about the organization of global scale of production and global trade. A lot of discussion has started in my country to some extent. Why do we import so much water from Israel, for example? All those lemons and oranges, etc., come from Israel, which is extremely short of water. So you see, these are some of the knowledge bases that are developing, so it's a tremendous source. Now let's look at people. I was very impressed when we had this discussion in Africa, when there was a discussion on sustainability. You know, this regular buzzwords. We talk about economics, we talk about environmental issues, social issues, and then those people said, you forgot about people. I said, what about people? Yeah, it's the most important source. If we don't have the people, you can forget about the rest. And that I thought was something we might overlook, or too much overlooking. That they say sustainability and food security starts by investing in people. And there were two lines of thought that were developed. They said, okay, you have to educate them, because that's the basis for increasing productivity. And the other one is that to say you have to keep them in agribusiness or in farming, because they are leaving. And then wherever I go, people tell me, the farmers are getting older. Apparently they're getting older. Well, what does it mean? Apparently there are not enough young people coming and trying to support in the future. So, and just as an example, which is not now a European example and not an Australian example, but maybe a third world example, this one from Africa, that I say we have low productivity, a huge, tremendous potential for development. Another one were land resources. You know that people are buying. USA is buying. I always thought China was the country which bought land in Africa mostly. But according to statistics, now I rely on statistics, it's the United States, United Kingdom, Egypt. They are buying land in Africa because there is resource. So there is land resource. Now, the question is how to exploit it. And there are these two issues, and this is a very, very critical part, how to keep young people in agri-food. One of the things that was mentioned there was we are developing a completely wrong image. This poor farmer image is destroying everything. And I have one example that was now from Vietnam, where they tried to integrate pupils in school and help them with technology, give them small computers, say, okay, go out to the farm, help your father, and then measure something and whatever, and put it in the computer, and then go to a village center, and then those data are being sent to an advisor, and they bring it back, and you can show it to your father, and then you are something very important, because that makes it all of a sudden attractive. It was quite interesting to see this, but in general, what we had to do is to invest in education, to provide the appropriate incentives. And the other one is that we have when it comes to productivity, we have a jump forward, an extremely transformative productivity. We are talking about productivity increase in Europe, probably also in Australia. That's fine. That's small issues. We have our major productivity gains in the last 100 years. Now the question is, what is with the rest of the world? And I just you say, okay, what can help here is this one. And I just take also this example that was brought forward from Africa, that they say, we don't have to care about those large farms. Forget about it. They are efficient and they can improve a little bit. That's not the key issue. But here, the big portion of subsistence farmers, if we move them from 0.5 to 5 tons per hectare, it's a 10 times increase. You can never manage this one here. And if you do this, it's enough food for the world. That was quite interesting to see, okay, that you try to get different things in perspective and say, where are the investments and where are also the issues we have to deal with? And what they tried, that's one of those examples where Novus, this company, is trying to put smartphone communication out as a kind of an extension service. That's a combination of new technology and extension or whatever. So moving forward. So we're very afraid that they won't mention Nigeria. They do an experiment now in Kenya, and they say, but that then country is very, very big. Yeah, and okay, just to think about it. Now, next part, technology, tool number 3. We also have this kind of statement, yeah, and it says we're in the information age, and that was one of the biggest things that are developing. We know when you go to the metro, all young people are looking just at the smartphones. So it's the technology. And I think that's true. Now, when we look at the technology, in principle, our opportunities, tremendous growth in computing power. It goes up exponentially. Then it gets more and more mobile. This goes up with the mobile technology. And then you have many of those issues. We don't yet know what to deal with those things, but they are coming. They are sending swarms of small and cheap satellites out there. There's certain issues to deal with. What does that mean also for agriculture? What does that mean for the food industry as a whole, for monitoring things that are happening? We are talking about new ways of sensor technologies that go back to the supermarket. New robots are entering. All this within the last few years, and that might create a revolution in our agri-food system. One of the areas when it comes to technology, there was always one of those big problem areas with communication. We had just a discussion on the future of Asian food chains. And then everybody was talking about tracking and tracing, and I thought, what are they talking about? But the key issue is that the communication is not working between the different areas. Now there's coming in something, people call it the cloud. And you all know this word because everybody's advertising it, that you should put all your data into the cloud, into somewhere up there. And they use sometimes the word future internet. But there is more behind it, and I just want to very quickly focus on a European project which is called Future Internet Public-Private Partnership. And there's an abbreviation called FIREWARE, which means Future Internet Ware. And what they try to do with this program is to make it, or develop an infrastructure for communication that is, I use now those words, affordable, easy to use, decentralized, that means data remain where they belong to. So farms don't send their data away, the data are there. And so that's a key issue, data ownership. Very sensitive. I don't know, it's in your country, in my country, everything is blocked by farmers because it's our data and we don't know what you are going to do with our data. So it's not so simple that you say farmers should send the data away. And then it was quite interesting. All of you know Global Gap probably by name. And some years ago they said, okay, we are caring for data distribution among retailers, etc. So they invited farmers, to send all their data. I was closely involved with that development, to a central database, and then Metro and some other of those big retail chains could use those data. And that was a total failure. They established a company, the company got bankrupt, and I always told them, how can you guarantee that your data are safe, that people are not using it for something they are not supposed to be used for? And then they were talking about firewalls and technical issues, and that a computer and nobody has access to the computer. I said, you don't understand the problem. And that was the end of the whole thing. So that is a precondition, and open so that it's very easy to connect to it. So they put about 500 million euro in it. 80 million are dedicated to food, but much of the other funds are also going to the food area. So again here, that brings me back to my old picture. We are not looking at a chain that goes through, but we want to have it working in this network, where different chains develop and people link to it from another chain and pick up some raw material from here and use it in another chain. So a very, very complex interacting system. It's a network challenge. I'm not quite sure if this is very helpful, this graph, but that is this type of thinking, and that brings me back to this talent factor. They say there are so many people out there who could develop small apps. And there was this kind of initiation when you look at the iPhone by Apple, when all of a sudden, I don't know how many apps are in there, 500,000 or a million or whatever, that maybe we are doing things wrong in the past. We looked at people, companies like SAP or whatever big ones, but these are the dinosaurs maybe of the past. Maybe we should tap into this talent source and let them develop many apps that support communication. And the key issue there is that you develop apps, and then we need to have a technology to combine that apps to a business application. That means to have some kind of an infrastructure source which says when this app ends, the other app starts. And you can combine them. And if there is if those apps have been talk to each other, that the output of this one can be used by the next one, then you just have to link them. Many different developers could develop this kind of business approach. That's a basic idea. And what we do at the moment is that we look at certain sectors. This is now the fruit and vegetable. You see they're picking up fruits. I don't know what it is, apples or whatever. So it goes to the cooperative, it's transported to a distribution center, transported, then it's in retail. So we look at those different chains, and then we develop trials at the moment. Not we, that's many countries involved all over Europe. And this is not just one of those trials where you have a big cooperative, a trader, many farms. I think there are 6,000 linked to it. Then there's a retail distribution center with about 400, 600 retail outlets linked to it, etc. So these are trials. And now we try to initiate app development that could support such a chain. And then in the area where I'm in, so the apps are being developed that deal with forward communication along the chain. Apps that develop deal with backward communication, exception reporting, which means if something goes wrong, food safety, and we initiate recalls. That's one of those things. Tracking, tracing. And then that brings us more towards our area, agriculture economists, that is say, but this is a basics. That's more technology based, that things are working. But here you need rules. Here you need something. We're talking about information markets, service markets. We are talking about communication with consumers, etc. So those things are now possible when the communication works. Okay, and these are now the things we might move into it. And just a very quick, these are the various sectors that are dealt with meat. This is more the retail sector, vegetable farming, spraying, flowers, plants. So quite a number of them are together. So that was tool number 3 when we talked about technology. Now the last tool, and I think that brings us to the heart a little bit of our profession when it comes to coordination, cooperation, and use just another word, governance, working together. And we have the responsibility to make things working together. And who else should do it? It's just the economists. Who else? And so sometimes I consider our profession a kind of an umbrella profession. It's not one of the lines. You have the economists doing some stuff, and then you have the scientists doing some stuff. No. I think we are the ones, and sometimes when we get into the discussion, I think we get this feedback. There is somebody who should coordinate, getting things together to put into a system. And I think that's just an example when we talk about tracking, tracing. This is a picture where you have different batches of products, whatever it is, could be wheat or meat or whatever. They are moving to trade, processing, retail. And now let's see, in retail stores, they detect that everything is wrong. So tracking, tracing means, okay, you go back. Just, okay, where were sources that went into this product? And then maybe you detect there was something wrong here. So you move forward from there. And the recall should cover all those different issues. That's a principle of tracking and tracing. You see, it's complex. It's not so simple. Now, okay, we did that out. Commodities, competitive products might complicate it. Now, if somebody doesn't participate, the whole thing breaks down. And that is now this key coordination problem. Nobody is taking care of this at the moment. And the same thing happens when we take the information moving forward. That track and tracing was more looking backward. Moving forward, when we talk about consumer communication, you know all those buzzwords. There are many more now on the table. I was once working together, it's also in this transparency booklet, they were developing the food miles, which was very bad. I once talked to a trader in Kenya, and he said this was the worst thing that ever happened. We lost the European market because of food miles, so it was bad for development. So they said, okay, now we talk about fair miles, etc., etc. So you get all those different indexes together, but still they are all based on some kind of information. Now the number one challenge, I call it now at the moment, is how to coordinate in a global open network with investment, standards, systems, content, timing, when is to be communicated what, data ownership, security. It's our business, I think. It's our business. I don't know who should care about this. This kind of governance, coordination, taking care that systems work. So the big problem in there is that individual investment is of little value. It's not everybody is participating, it's almost of no. Yeah, why should somebody do it? Because if there's a break before me or after me, it's not working. So the value is in the sector. And the question is how can that work? So I just continue here very quickly, tracking tracing costs, where cost of control of tracking tracing system, and then you have benefits, lower cost of recalls, lower probability of recalls. That's now a very basic example, this tracking tracing of coordination. And that's the only formula I have in there. I thought I had to provide you with a formula. And that's now the way an enterprise looks at it. Yeah, it says, okay, we have recall costs if you're in no system, because something went wrong, and then we are responsible for it. And we have to recall and maybe have to pay a fine or whatever. So these are our costs. If we now invest in a system, the system costs us. We have to put up a computer, we have to whatever. And then the recall costs with a new system are lower because they are not so often. But then the discussion is that it says, yeah, but the probability that this happens without a system is so low. In my lifetime it will not happen. With my father it has never happened. Why should it happen to me? So, because the probability is so low, this value is very low. So if this value, the perceived cost, if I have no system, is so low, why should I invest in this? That means this would have to go down to almost zero, and this shouldn't cost almost nothing if I had a benefit. So for an individual enterprise, it usually is not worthwhile. So why should it fail? The question is different when it comes to the sector. For the sector, the probability of recall, that somewhere the recall happens and has a bad image, the market failure issues with all those problems, at least in Europe, I don't know in your country, with AHEC and before that BSE, etc. The costs are extremely high. If they are the AHEC with a big problem, it took weeks before sources were found, but we don't know today if they have really been found. So, and the whole market broke down with a big problem with Spain, because all the cucumber harvest had to be destroyed because somebody in Germany said it was from Spain. So everything went wrong, but because it didn't work, the market broke down. So there's a high cost if there are no systems. So implementing systems would reduce the probability that something goes wrong substantially. So the sector as a whole would gain. So now, what to deal with it? For the enterprise, the benefit is lower than the cost. An individual enterprise. For the sector, the benefit is much higher than the cost. Now, what to do? And that's where you get into what kind of policy regulation structure we're going to implement. In the Netherlands, I think the chains can do it, or the networks, or all the Dutch people together. They are used to working together. Governments in my country, whenever we discuss this, they say the government has to come in. So what? That's the last resource. So I think that is one of those areas we have to deal with. Now, I have some few slides now when we talk about more combined systems that are being under discussions now with people. One of them is linking consumers to production. making consumers aware. There's a lot of technology discussion now at the moment, how to communicate between products and consumers. And you see here a smartphone element. And there is one technology that is arising, they call it beacon, I don't know if you say beacon or bacon, beacon technology, that works on a kind of a Bluetooth technology, which is not so important, but they're small, cheap devices that can be placed everywhere in the store. And guide consumers, that was now an example from a store where they are guided to certain, I don't know, special offers which people could buy. The question is, who could use this, all those things? There's a lot of information. We are discussing that people who have certain allergens or people who are maybe interested in animal welfare, that they communicate with a product and they get this information. And there's tremendous information already around. Some of the information we expect from the chain, but some of the information is in the internet. I did once a study with some of my students and said, what information about certain products is around? You have Global Gap, you have many instances, all those quality systems that are on there. When you look at labels in products, sometimes the products, I don't know if it is in your country, in my country, sometimes there are 10, 15 labels there, from all different type of organization. And each of the label links to something in the internet. And each of the labels says something, and data that is in the internet. And we try to combine it and analyze with the smartphone technologies, the labels were automatically analyzed, connected with the internet, and then checked, is my question regarding animal welfare considered in any of those labels, which tells me, yes, you are safe to buy this product. So these things are slowly moving. Now the question is, okay, content. We are talking about visions. And technology is developing, but nobody knows really what is going on there. We had a discussion also in this transparency book. We would need to do a lot of research in many different countries are different, people, cultures are different. What type of communication do we need to move forward to consumers? We don't know. And that is one of those things where we almost realize there are so big empty spots in our research activity which prevent the technology really to take off and to provide the opportunities that are in principle there. Another one where economists are not really in there. When we look at example carbon footprint, these are different types of products and this is food. So food is very bad when it comes to carbon. So when we look at different food, what is very bad is beef. So everybody says, okay, no beef. It is vegetable. Now, one of the retail, it does not come from research, it came from a retail company in Germany. What they tried to do is that they looked at the different stages of the chain, they established an advisory board, and then they said, okay, well, various indicators like energy, land use, waste, blah, 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 and then evaluated a certain product that they want to sell and said, okay, if it's dark red, it is bad, regarding energy, it's better, and then they put that together in an index and said, okay, for agriculture, it's up here. And then they did the same for whatever stage that there is better. And then they calculate a global index. And then if the index reaches a certain threshold, they say it will be part of our pro-planet product range. It looks complicated, there's a lot of data needed, that is a key issue, but it might be a way to go. This retailer says their vision is that in the long run all products are following this. And they say it's a very flexible issue because you're not, if you're in this stage, you're not forced to improve here. You could improve there or there, depending on your abilities in your own stage. And that gives us a possibility to stepwise improve without giving too much or too many regulations and say too much about what people. I like this approach, and we will see. Then when we go to production companies, they always think of communicating with consumers. That's an example from Barilla, this noodle producer in Italy. They said, look, we found out, they didn't find out, but they knew that as people you should eat vegetables. That's green here. and you should keep out of sweets. Yeah? That's the food pyramid. And they said, now let's look at environmental footprint from a production side. What is good is here. What is bad is here. And now when you look at this, it's almost the same product. So what is good for your health is good for the environment. What is bad for your health is bad for the environment. That's a very nice linkage, because it brings two things together which are usually very separate from each other. And now they said, I have to move forward. They said we have to communicate this. And now it brings, what they do is they calculate, it's a Barilla index, they put together water, carbon, ecological footprints, also a similar type of calculation, which says this green has a high value, this red has a very bad value. And now they say how to communicate it. And that brings us again to education and maybe using technology carriers to communicate those things forward. You know, at least in my country, they move in the retail store more to these electronic devices for price display. I don't know how it is in your country, which is a first step. So there could be different, and the smartphone could communicate with those devices. That say, I'm not interested in the price, I'm interested in something else. It gets a communication back. So things are moving. When we look into, let's say, 5 years in the future, what does that mean? But it needs a lot of input, I think, from our side, which is, in my opinion, not adequate at the moment. Waste, another very nice example. We all know we should reduce waste. Okay. And people sometimes do this kind of triangle that they say, okay, most preferable is if you avoid waste. Very bad is if you have to dispose it. But that is not really a problem in many countries. Maybe in yours is, in some countries it is, but I use just the example of the Netherlands. I was impressed when they said we only have 4% of all waste is really disposed of. And all the others are being used in here. The key issue is the deeper we go, the more we lose resources that have been invested before to get to that stage. Yeah. So if you have a food product where we invest a lot of resources, if we dispose, all of those resources have been lost. Now, people have been working in this lower part, recycling, recovering, etc. And I think some of you know those buzzwords, cradle to cradle, where you get some of your elements that are in your product, bring it back to the source, maybe making fertilizer again out of a certain product, etc. But that is a little bit, that's in the lower part. What can we do up there? And so that is a key issue we have to deal with. And that brings us again to technology, working together. I think most of you know this example because it has been communicated quite a bit. But this example by Tesco, who started in Korea to put billboards at subway stations. And people could use their smartphones and order products in the morning when they go for work. And then in the evening they could pick it up at a retail store. And Astas, I don't know how you pronounce it, Estas or Astas, it's a company that belongs to Walmart. They are trying now to do things in the UK. And just 1 week ago I was told by the Swedes that they're doing research projects to, not with the billboards, but with the online ordering. They say, okay, people have to order online, it will be until a certain period of time or a certain time, and then some hours later they can get the product at certain pickup stations. I think Walmart is trying it for all those remote areas also in the US. But I think the key issue here is they order the products from the producer at the time when they get the order from consumers. So they don't have to have those big displays at retail where a lot of this waste is being created, but so it's kind of an ordering on the fly. Yeah. They get the orders in the morning, they can organize with fruit producer or whoever during the day to get it delivered. So it's one of the ways, combining knowledge, combining systems, combining technology to reduce waste. We don't know how this develops. Things are going on. Are we involved? I don't know. And now that brings me to the last example, because that's very much discussed, and we had a lot of discussion also with Global Gap and some of those companies with the information market. I mentioned it quickly before, where I said, okay, farmers are not eager to get their data away. Because this is a primary source of data. Yeah? So we always ask farmers to produce data, produce it, and then give it for free. And that cannot work in the long run. So take this one example that classically, okay, we have products I use now said without certification. It means without certain data, production data. What have you been spraying, how much fertilizer has been used, what type of production system has been used. So this is something going on, and there is no certain support for claims. That means some people might say it's organic product. We had just yesterday a discussion about all the organic products that are being sold at companies. I found them also here, called Aldi, and they are in the sheep range. And in our country now, they say most of the organic products come from China. So they say it's organic. So, and then we say, what support is there for this claim? It's just labeled because it says it's organic, not more support behind it. So very, very sensitive on we're not, many people do not really trust what's going on there. So the next thing is that you say, okay, we have another product range where there is where the claim is being supported with appropriate information. So it comes along the chain or whatever, and that is not the same price because information has a price. That is now this general thinking. And Global Gap has always said our product should be more expensive because we provide support for our claim. Others who do not provide that, they are not of the same quality because the claim is the value in itself. Now the question is for us, will there be data or information markets develop in the future? That farmers sell products and they'll sell information. And you can combine it, pay for both by retailer, or you just buy the products. It's the same product, but you cannot support the claim. So those things might develop. They are slowly being discussed in its early stages. So I have just said, okay, this economics, yes, we could develop information market. So products that where you have a lot of data available, they are just channeled into the market with products without data, and you sell the information separately, and then it can be combined again. And I take this one example, most of you might know it, I like very much, which has been developed in the soybean market, which is called book and claim, where they say, okay, we produce certain soybean without any data, whatever, and then we have other soybean that is produced in a very environmental friendly way. Yeah, with all the data, so it's just perfect and just is the way it should be. Yeah? And everything is put in the same basket. Yeah? So on the market there is no difference in the wholesale market, so all soybean is put in the same basket. But the data for this are being put in a certificate and put up for sale. And say for these products, I have a certificate. You can buy it separately. So what companies could do, they buy the products, the soybean products, here, and then they say, okay, for 50% of those products, we can buy a certificate. Allocate that certificate to 50% and sell it again as a product with a certificate. This way of organization functions if the data are not relevant for the product content as such, but for the way it has been produced. Because then it doesn't matter how you separate here. Yeah? Because the key issue is that on the market, let's say 50% of products have been sold as being environmental friendly produced, and 50% have been environmental friendly produced. So it's fine. It's working nicely.
It's like green energy. Yeah, like very renewable energy.
Yeah.
In the system.
So these things are developing. And this is now a specific case where we don't deal with the product as such, that we say, okay, this spray is important for our health, like we know it doesn't contain pesticides or whatever. But it's one of those first examples where people have thought of separating products from the information and selling it separately. Now the question is, who develops tools, rules for information markets? It's new market they developed. We have a lot of market associations, organizations for products, but not yet for the information. And who takes it up? So that is one of those things that will develop in the future, because we have a stalemate, at least in my country, because data are not being communicated from the farming community. And you know that a single farmer is very unique. You can do whatever you want to do. But farmers as a group are extremely powerful. If they say no as a group, there is no retail which is powerful enough to really push a group which says no into a certain direction. We sometimes forget this. Sometimes we always say the poor farmer is the poor guy in the chain. It's not true. It's only true if farmers are not working together. That is, I think, the issue. Oh, that was, I gave you this one as the last one. Urbanization. A lot of discussion going on. You see here, the blue one is the number of people living in urban areas is increasing very much. Just a picture of all those big cities, especially in Asia, that are developing with more than 10 million. There's nothing in Australia. You are out of the picture, but the city is more than 10 million. It is not discussed in our community, at least now in the Agriculture Economics conference, there was nothing about it. Maybe it's different in your country. There are things that are developing. We're talking about urban agriculture. Scientists, agricultural scientists are discussing it very, very intensively, and engineers various ways. Talk about vertical agriculture. The Swedish company which was trying to collect money to develop a high-rise in Köping, in a city in Sweden, said on one side is agriculture, on the other side we have offices. And they said, okay, just based on the offices, it is worthwhile to build this high-rise. So the agriculture part is an add-on. So it's from an economic point of view, it's viable. It's not a big thing. Factories, as you might know, that especially in Japan after their accident here, more and more of those food factories have been developed. Food is developed in-house, and they do this kind of advertising. I don't know if that's true. Less water, less fertilizer. They can also control the quality of product through the appropriate LED lights. I don't know what's going on. I'm not an engineer, but things are developing. And well, the question is, what will develop there? What type of organization, food chain management or food chain organizations will develop? Will there be market organizations? Are there policies involved there or whatever? So it's a completely new area that comes in. It's not yet mainstream, but it's moving more and more into some kind of it's not remaining a niche. I'm very much convinced on this. It will maybe remain for some time a niche, but it will become part of a mainstream development, I'm quite sure. So that was my discussion, and very quickly overview. I looked at the network. I think keep this in mind from my point of view. Crocodile is very important. We discussed this optimistic view. We're very optimistic. And we say, okay, IT, transparency economists, what role to play here to make it really come true, this positive part. We discussed many of those issues. We had those 4 tools. Governance was the latest one, where I said, okay, just getting those different things together, a little bit of technology, knowledge, some people who have to deal with it, but have a scheme, have an infrastructure, have a system behind it that works, that is also from an economic point of view viable, that can work. And that's, I think, what we need to do. So, thank you very much. It's a long discussion, I'm sorry, but I don't know if you know how many slides it was. Usually I don't put so many in one discussion, so sorry, but thank you. When I come to Australia, I take the chance.
Any questions, comments?